Hi, everyone. This is Attila Pentek. I'm the VP Exploration of Wallbridge Mining. And today on the call, I also have we have Frank Demers here with us, who's the VP Mining and Projects. And we're gonna dive a little bit into the technical details of what Wallbridge is about. In the last 3 years, we've been going through an amazing discovery story at our flagship Fenelon project. We're exploring on the Detour-Fenelon gold trend, which is in the northern Abitibi. We drilled about 300,000 meters in the last 3 years, and that resulted in a milestone achievement of putting out our maiden resource estimate in November of Fenelon, and we're continuing exploring from there on, increasing the resources. This year, we're drilling about 160,000 meters. We've got 9 to 10 drill rigs turning, and majority of the focus is on expanding the resources, plus making new discoveries on this belt. We own about close to 100 kilometers of that very prospective underexplored belt, which is in the northern Abitibi in Quebec, which of course is a great jurisdiction, and it hasn't seen as much exploration as the southern portion of the Abitibi.
Great. Attila, thank you so much. Really good introduction. Frank, nice to have you on the call as well. I'm completely new to Wallbridge Mining. Before I was lined up for this interview, I knew nothing about it. I see that it's a relatively new company, a relatively fresh discovery. Can I just ask before we get into it, kind of what your roots were into the company and how long you've been with it? And perhaps let's start with you, Attila, and then we can go on to Frank.
Yeah, so I've been with Wallbridge for a very long time. So I started off with a master's thesis, then PhD, which was supported by Wallbridge. And then in 2010, when I finished the PhD, that's when I started full-time with Wallbridge. So it's been quite a long time ago. And it's been great to see, really sort of organically growing the company and acquiring Fenelon and then sort of building a team. And we've got a pretty big team now. And I've taken over the VP exploration position end of 2017 or early 2018, and then since then, it's been a very exciting time for Wallbridge.
So when did you were at university and you had a summer a placement? Is that right? Or kind of
Well, it was basically, I'm originally from Hungary. Based on my name, you can probably tell that I'm not originally from Canada. So, yeah, I was at the university in Hungary, and there was an amazing opportunity came up that I can do a PhD study here in Sudbury, sort of a collaboration between the universities. And yeah, Wallbridge was always very supportive of research projects, academic projects, good industry, academia collaborations. And that's how I originally came to Canada in 2005. And then, so it's been a good ride since then.
Wow, amazing! I did some. I did part of the International Mining Students Week. I don't know if with the Royal School of Mines, and there were some crazy Hungarians on that trip. We went around Slovenia, had a good time back in.
I'm one of those crazy Hungarians, but I think I mellowed down a little bit since I moved to Canada.
Yeah, well, thank goodness from what I could see from that trip. Sorry, Frank, over to you. What was your relation to the company?
All right, I've been with Wallbridge since the beginning of the bulk sample in 2018, so I'm going on 4 years in June. Prior to that, I spent a solid 15 to 16 years in the industry. So I've been about 21 years now in the mining industry. I started my career with Inco in 2001 as an underground miner, and then with an engineering degree, and then progressed through the ranks within Inco, which then became Vale. Basically spent 15 years there through various roles in operations and in engineering, and finished my career there as a mine manager, responsible for the Creighton mine for the last 4 years of my career. In 2016, I moved on from Vale over to KGHM as the general manager of operations in Sudbury, where I had responsibility for all of the operational aspects of KGHM International in Sudbury. So I had three plants, basically one in operation, a second one in operation by the time I left, and 2 others in care and maintenance. So it was basically a role where I had full responsibility for everything from HR, finance, IT, operations, maintenance, and so on, as well as any commercial agreements that we would have had with neighboring companies. So it was quite an interesting role. And my journey into Wallbridge was basically I knew that they had an interesting project in Quebec. And I was really looking to learn more, get away from base metals and learn more about the gold industry. And so, in discussions with Mars, which we had been talking for a few years on and off, I just felt that it was the right time and, to join the company into a really interesting gold project, which has turned out to be fantastic.
Isn't it interesting that as you started off with your kind of deep specialization, 15 years, and then mine management, kind of going right down the technical kind of that technical kind of career path, and yet in a few years' time, like so many of us, you end up with a varied role, managing people, managing different processes across different silos. It's an extraordinary way that at the end of the day, so much is about people management and about kind of making teams operate efficiently.
Absolutely. The most important part of my job is about relationships and people. I mean, nothing happens without the people and without the relationships. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later, but a lot of the work I'm doing is on the social side and making sure that we're building relationships with our stakeholders. So that's probably the most important part of my job.
We used to joke about people coming out of big companies and having to have the kind of the chip removed from the back of the head. Because you're kind of slightly robotic. And I know it's a disservice because I've got lots of friends who work in big companies and they're not at all like that. But I think that, in that humor, there was something about the cultural shift, which is needed to adapt in a smaller company and be more flexible. Can you just talk a little bit about how that culture, how you coped with the change and that kind of going from the super big
absolutely
structure?
So I've always been somebody who's very focused on continuous improvement and trying to do things better and better every time. And so, the larger the organization, sometimes the more difficult it can be to make that shift. It happens, but it takes a lot of focus and effort, and it takes engagement from a lot of people to do it. But when you get into a bit smaller company, continuous improvement is something that's needed for survival, and it's something that's also very easy to make happen when you've only got a handful of people reporting to you or working with you. And so mobilizing workforce or mobilizing people to get things done is quite easy. And so you've got that flexibility, you've got the ability to make change very quickly. You just go ahead and do that, and you make sure that you bring people along at the same time. I can say the great thing of working for a big company, though, is that you bring with you some structure.
Good, thank you, both of you. It's really interesting getting the different backgrounds. Shiv, have a look at any maps. As I understand it, kind of the Abitibi, you've got these kind of roughly east-west kind of granite greenstone belts, and the Detour-Fenelon trend is the northernmost trend. It's presumably much less explored, presumably much more difficult to work in terms of climate. But I don't know anything about glacial till cover or anything else about it. Can you just give me a little introduction to that kind of belt as a whole?
For sure, yeah. So, a lot of the listeners would obviously be familiar with the world-class mining camps in the southern Abitibi, which is Timmins, Kirkland Lake, Rouen, Val-d'Or, all those camps that have been mined for over 100 years. And, basically those were discovered by prospectors. The mineralization was right on surface. It was all exposed, so you could just follow up on, from there on. Now we're in the northern Abitibi, which is all covered with glacial till. So like you mentioned as well, basically on our land package, probably around average 25, 30 meters of till cover. Now in some areas that goes up to almost 100 meters. And we have maybe a handful of outcrops on the entire 100-kilometer land package, right? So, as a geologist, you can probably appreciate how difficult it is to, just even interpret geology and having a basic idea of what we got. So a lot of it, obviously, therefore prospectors didn't have any chance to find anything here. So it was all basically wetlands. and muskeg. And so exploration only started in the 80s, 90s, when airborne geophysics started to be more commonly be applied. And then people followed up with diamond drilling, and this whole area was sort of a VMS camp in the past.
I was just about to say, because the 80s exploration, Noranda, Inco, looking for VMSs. Because
Matagami was found in the 50s, and then there's a mine called Selby mine, which is another VMS deposit, so copper, zinc, silver deposit nearby. The whole area was explored for massive sulfide deposits. And I mean, as you know, exploring for those is very different from exploring for gold. So you're just looking for large conductors, mag anomalies, those kind of things, and then you drill them, and if you don't find the right sulfides, then you move on. And so actually a lot of the holes weren't even sampled for gold, or if they sampled for gold, often it wasn't followed up, because as a lot of the previous large corporate cultures, you were very focused on certain commodities, right? So we're just looking for copper, zinc. Don't worry about gold. So that's why, and Fenelon was one of these original, the original Fenelon showing was found in the mid 90s. It was by a VMS company, drilling an EM anomaly and hitting some gold mineralization. And
what was the gold hit that was ignored? Was it kind of 50 meters at 0.5 grams or something? Or
oh no, like Fenelon wasn't actually ignored, because it was high grade enough that it tweaked people's interest, and over the years they sort of drilled off very tightly a small area, about 200 meters by 200 meter box, what was really closely drilled. And I mean, some of that has been some promotion going on that, and there's some spectacular high grade mineralization. But there was other hits on the belt that haven't been really properly followed up, because like you say, I mean, if somebody hits, I don't know, 5 meters of 2 grams or something like that, they wouldn't have tweaked maybe their interest, but now it's something that you would take seriously and follow up, right?
Yeah. And the nickel, you've got a nickel deposit in the portfolio. Was that discovered in that VMS phase? Was that part of that?
No, it was actually more recently, and I mean that's the fun or beauty of exploring undercover, is that you can stumble on all kinds of different unexpected things that you didn't even look for. So like VMS companies were looking for copper, zinc, and they stumbled on gold, and this was almost the reverse. It was Balmoral Resources, which was a gold focused company, and they started drilling this ultramafic rock suddenly, and they decided, well, let's assay for nickel and PGs as well, and sure enough, they realized that there's some pretty good nickel content. So then they got a little bit distracted, or they started drilling off the nickel deposit. So that's how that story came about. And there's a nice about 5.5 million tons now of, I forget the exact grade, but around 1.5% nickel equivalent, approximately.
That's not bad. Many juniors could get started on something like that. So coming back to your trend and the glacial till and the tools that you've got available to you, do you use this ionic leach kind of soil technique that SGS has, or the Bleg analysis, or are you very much driven by geophysics?
So I mean, right now, I guess with the Fenelon discovery in the last 3 years, we've been fortunate enough or spoiled that we had constantly mineralization to step out on, and it's been just in the last year that we really started figuring out where else to go on the belt and what else might be out there, and how do you prioritize areas within that almost 100-kilometer land package, right? And I mean, there's already 3 known large gold systems. So we have the Detour Lake. Well, not we have, but the Detour Lake mine is on the Ontario side, of course, now owned by Agnico, and one of Canada's largest gold mines. And then there's Fenelon, which we now know is a pretty significant multi-million ounce deposit. We're trying to turned it into a tier one, asset, and it's about 75, 80 kilometers away from Detour. And then halfway between that, there's Martiniere, which is also shaping up to be a really nice large gold system. So, obviously the first thing to do is try to find satellite deposits around those existing, around Fenelon and Martiniere. So we're doing a lot of, so magnetics has helped us a lot. And we've flown some really detailed UAV or drone-based magnetics, which they're flying closer to the ground and closer line spacing. So you get a much better resolution magnetics. So that has helped us a lot at Fenelon to keep stepping out on the right host rocks, trying to identify the structures that might be gold bearing or that are part of the gold story.
Do you have a handle on the relationship between structure, the magnetics, and the mineralization?
Yeah. I think we're getting a really good handle on that, and testament of that is I guess that a couple of the new projects that we went to. One of them is the Crux, and then the other one is Casso, which are near the existing deposits. Basically, from interpreting from the airborne magnetics, we were able to go into very grassroots areas and right away hit with diamond drilling structures that are gold bearing. So we were able to identify the right type of orientation, right type of structures. Now, of course, it's still not a discovery because you have to properly drill it off and see where the economic deposit is. But at least we know which structures are gold bearing. But it's still being figured out. So there's a PhD study, there's several MSc studies that we're supporting, because just like the exploration is really far behind in comparison to the Southern Abitibi, the research understanding is also very far behind. So we don't have all the H days, the stratigraphy, the structural framework for the whole area isn't all that well developed yet, like it would be in Val-d'Or, for example, right? So we're doing a lot of work with the Geological Survey and universities to get a really good understanding of the geology there.
When I look at your 3D model, it seems to be it seems as if it's got some good thicknesses on, and Mars in previous videos has mentioned that the kind of the mineralizing widths are anything between 5 and 20 meters across. Can you just kind of describe to me, are these purely shear hosted? Are they preferably in sediments? Are they preferably in volcanics? Are you getting stacked zones? What is that? Is that a lithological feature or a tectonic feature? Can you just describe a little bit more about the kind of the intra-deposit geology?
Yeah. So I guess as a basic, when you get into Fenelon, it looks like an orogenic gold deposit. There's a lot of shearing going on, lots of ductile deformation. But then as we're starting to understand it more and more, we believe that there was sort of a precursor intrusion-related gold system, probably. A lot of that is still being developed. But yeah, so the idea is that there would have been probably, so there's a rock called Jeremy diorite, which is a sort of a massive intrusion, a dioritic rock, which is one of our maiden host rocks. And when that got in place, probably that brought in already a lot of the fluids and a lot of the gold. So there was some gold mineralization associated to that. And then the orogenic processes, which formed orogenic gold deposits and which are developing along the Sunday Lake Deformation Zone, which is our main break there. Similar to in the south, you have Destor Porcupine or the Larger Lake Cadillac deformation zones. In our case, it's the Sunday Lake Deformation Zone. And associated to that, there's these secondary structures, which often those are the ones, really controlling the gold mineralization. Yeah, they come off of the, and so one of these structures is the Jeremy Fault, which seems to have brought in a lot of the fluids, and it's sort of roughly parallel to the Sunday Lake Deformation Zone. So yeah, so we have this really nice host rock, which is the diorite, and then there's another host rock called Main Gabbro, which is a gabbroic sill. So these are more competent intrusive rocks
they fracture more. They fracture
Yeah.
more brittly. They create more space, and that's where they pressure drops, and you get the precipitation out.
Yeah. So
do you have a map or a? Can you bring any of this up? I think it'd be really useful.
Yeah, I'll try to bring it up
to get this in.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the 3D model of the Fenelon, geology, which is in Verify. Actually, if people want to, this is a really cool website where you can play around with the data that we have here. There's a lot of layers that can be turned on and off and all that. So this gray here is at the bottom there. That's the Sunday Lake deformation zone, and you can actually bring up here the magnetics.
What do you call it? Do you call it the Sunday League or the Sunday Lake?
Sunday Lake. Sorry, it's Sunday Lake.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see here from this is the magnetics. This is that drone mag I was talking about. And you can see the Sunday Lake deformation zone. It really shows up as a very strong mag low there at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then, the main host rocks that we need to remember are the Jeremy diorite, which is this brown shape here.
Yeah.
And, right now the shape of it is just very much restricted by where we have drilled it. But one cool thing is that it really corresponds very well to this sort of a magnetic low, the green. If you can see there, the green, maybe I should toggle it on and off.
Yeah.
You can see that sort of the green shape of the magnetics maps it really well. So based on that, now we know from geologic maps that it continues in the north. So I can doodle that on here, but from the model on, it would sort of continue up northwest that way. But we believe that based on the magnetics, there could be other fingers of it or other parts of that diorite over here in the west where we haven't really drilled yet. So this is really our main host rock, and not just host rock, but it's also it's sort of a regional control on the fluids. Bringing in the fluids, and then into
the fractured gabbro. Sorry, fractured diorite. The fractured diorite.
Inside diorite. Now I should bring up here. There's also the Jeremy fault that I mentioned.
Sorry. So you're effectively saying that it's the Jeremy diorite is both the source of the fluids as well as being a good host for the mineralization.
Both, yeah. So there's already some evidence coming out from fluid inclusions and age dates and things like that. The base metal contents and things like that indicate to us that the diorite already was mineralized when it got in place. Now we shouldn't get into all the ambiguities of was there a subduction in the Archean and how that all worked, but people. There's a group of scientists that think, similar to porphyry deposits, you would have these intrusion-related deposits in the Archean. So that's what would have originally been the mineralization, and then when the orogenic process happened, that's when the Sunday Lake deformation zone happened, and the Jeremy fault, which is this other shape now that I brought up, and those brought in a lot of the fluids, caused deformation, and distributed it, brought in probably more gold and distributed it further. And so that's where the other host rock comes in, which is this blue shape, which is the main gabbro, we call it. It's sort of a silt complex. So there's a lot of these gabbros and peroxenites sort of mineralized there. And if you can see this little shape here, that's the original gabbro zone. So when we inherited the project, that's all that was there. That's that 200 meters by 200 meters that I mentioned. Everybody was mainly focusing on, and then it was really in early 2019 when we drilled the hole 51, which was sort of drilling from the north towards the south, and that's when we got into a couple hundred meters of this totally new rock type, totally new type of mineralization, and that's when we discovered what we call now the area 51, which is what's inside the diorite. which is really this vein network. So because, like you said, the diorite breaks up really brittly, you get this network of veins developed inside the diorite.
Are they parallel to that second fault? Sorry, I've forgotten the name of that, of the Jeremy fault.
Jeremy fault. Yeah, it's a combination. So because the fluids came in, it deposited a lot of the mineralization along the diorite, which is these shear zones we call Tabasco Cayenne, along the diorite contact, and then a lot of the fluids came into the diorite itself, and caused mineralization sort of parallel to the Jeremy fault, and then also sort of in this orientation, this northeast southwest orientation, which we call, that's the Area 51 orientation, sort of going northeast southwest.
So basically, you've got a very active hydrothermal system which is well mineralized. And when you look at your kind of some of your longer intersections, actually, could you spin it around so we can almost look kind of end on to that fault? Kind of, if you put it horizontal and then just
I can step here. So I can do here's a cross section.
Yeah, there we go.
You can see that. So yeah, now I'm showing a little bit different things. So now I'm showing these are all the grade shells above 1.5 gram per ton.
Okay, so that's really nice. That's a really nice view there. And is it quite evenly distributed, or does a lot of grade hang on narrow structures, or do you get kind of how can you spot it downhole? I mean, is it disseminated? Can you see the alteration? Can you see the sulfide veinings?
Yeah. So what has been really nice with Fenelon that it's maybe I don't know if I bring back the diorite, if it's going to be a bit too messy. No, I think it still works probably. Yeah. So I mean the way we've drilled this deposit is we drill from south to north, because that gives us a pretty good these are the drill holes here. So we've been doing a grid from south to north. That gives us a good compromise between the two structural orientations. If you remember, I was talking about so these are the Tabasco Cayenne zones are going like this. The Area 51 zones are sort of going like that. So drilling to the north gives you a pretty good intersection of both. And so what has been nice with the drilling pattern is basically you're almost entirely in mineralized within the mineralized envelope. So we're drilling all these holes that are sort of 800 meters or kilometer deep holes, and 70 or 80% of it is in areas where we can expect mineralization, or there's a possibility of mineralization. So it's been really nice going in and out of these zones and basically drilling off this Area 51, which again is this stuff inside the diorite, as well as the Tabasco Cayenne, which is along the diorite. You can drill that off at the same time with the same holes. And then so I answered your question.
Do your geologists know when they're logging it? Do they know that they're in mineral because they can? So do they know that they're in grading stuff because they can see?
Yeah. And so within the diorite, when we intersect the Area 51 veins, those are pretty recognizable, sort of gray, smoky quartz veins. There's usually quite a bit of sulfides associated with it. So there's chalcopyrite, molybdenite, and a lot of visible gold specks usually in these veins. And the veins aren't very thick. They're a few centimeters, maybe 10 centimeters in thickness, but they're frequent enough that when you have a 50-meter wide zone or 30-meter wide zone, there's a lot of these veins running parallel to each other, and giving you a nice overall grade of anywhere between a gram to 2 grams, sort of a grade. And we've actually seen that now when we went underground earlier this year, about a month ago or 3 weeks ago. We had a press release on our underground development that we did, and we drifted into Area 51, and it was really nice to see all these veins and everything underground, all the alteration package over a 30-meter width, lining up really well with what we expected from the drill holes. So So yeah, when you go through the diorite, you always know when you're in the zones and what is going to be mineralized. And then when you get into the Tabasco Cayenne zones, those are very visual. So those are usually a few meters to tens of meter wide, really ductile, deformed, lots of shearing, lots of sericite alteration, silicification. Again, lots of sulfides and visible gold. So you know exactly when you're in the mineralization.
Right. Now, Attila, I'm conscious of time ticking by, and I've been asking too many detailed geological questions, which interest me, but perhaps it helps me get a picture of what's going on. But let's zoom out a bit. And you mentioned the word envelope to the mineralization. You said you're pretty much within the envelope to the mineralization. Now, one of the things that I always advocate junior exploration companies to do is to understand their resource and to kind of put an envelope around their mineralized. There comes a point when it gets harder to find the new ounces because the mineralizing system is kind of dying away. Can you kind of describe how close you are to that process? Have you found the edges of this thing? And I know you've got some plunging chutes going down at depth, but just kind of talk to me where you feel that you are in kind of the process of defining the envelope of mineralization around Fenelon.
Yeah, that's really the question. So basically, I mean, you can see on this image here the open pit shell that was done in the 2021 resource estimate, which is really just a snapshot in time. That's at the time that was the pit that they could push down economically to a certain depth, but it was really constrained by where we've drilled. And you can see all the resources are basically inside the pit or underneath the pit in the underground portion, but you can see a lot of intersections outside of that. So if you look at the scale bar, or color scale, I should say, yellow is everything above 0.35 to 1.5. So that's sort of the open pit mineable type mineralization. And then there's the higher grades in red and purple. So you can see basically the known part of the Jeremy diorite is continuously mineralized, but we just didn't have enough drilling down here in the south. So if I draw, from the edge of the pit to the Sunday Lake deformation zone, this is about a 1 kilometer distance where we know this diorite occurs and there is good mineralization in it. We just didn't have enough drill holes. So originally the property boundary when we acquired Fenelon was actually much smaller. It was only like, something like this. And so the southern portion used to belong to Balmoral before we made the acquisition of Balmoral. So there was much less drilling in the south. And there's this area here we call Ripley zone down here. And that's an area, for example, that we're very excited about because, it's very close to the Sunday Lake deformation zone. It's sort of hugging the northern part of it, which is a similar, geologic setting like the Detour Lake mine on the Ontario side. And there's already some pretty respectable intersections there. Just last week we announced about over 200 meters of 0.5 gram per ton, which it's probably borderline economic. At those depths, it's probably not economic yet, but it tells us that there's really a lot of fluids moving through it. It's a very pervasively mineralized system down there. So now we're looking to bring that closer to the surface, find the higher grade portions within that will be economic. So a lot of our drilling, this year is focusing on, filling in this southern portion here, the Ripley zone, drilling that properly off, making that hopefully all part of the resource. And then also here in the southwest, so I was mentioning these Area 51 zones kind of going towards the southwest.
At depth or at surface?
This is all still surface. So there's a lot of lateral expansion potential. So we haven't really found the edges of the system laterally. So that's a lot of the focus that we're going to do this year. So again, last week's press release had a few nice intersections here in the southwest, kind of pushing things. And then also here towards the northwest, where this, the Jeremy Fault continues along the Jeremy diorite contact there. So those are some of the areas where we really see good expansion potential laterally. Once you get up here to the northwest, a little bit further away, you're probably too far inside the diorite. You're too far away from the contact, too far away from the faults. That it's probably not as well mineralized. So we're trying to stick closer to the contacts and where the diorite is. So that's sort of the immediate resource expansion laterally. And then,
so just to ask, is that going to be about half of your half? You mentioned 150,000, 160,000 meters of drilling this year. Is that going to be? How are you going to divide that? Divide it into quarters. How much infill work are you going to do? How much is going to go around the edges?
Basically, out of the 150, 60,000 meters, we devoted about 60% of that to Fenelon. So say 110,000 meters to Fenelon. And a bit of that will be probably 20, 30,000 meters. It depends a little bit on the result. A lot of it is result driven, right? So 20, 30,000 of the meters will probably be inside the known footprint. You can see there's large parts of the pit that already have mineralization, but they're not part of the resource because again, there wasn't enough drilling at the time to make it part of the resource estimate. So we just got to do a little bit more drilling in there to have enough spacing that we can move that into the inferred or indicated resource category. But what's nice about the initial resource is that already 60% of it was in the indicated category. So we don't have to do a lot of tedious infill drilling where we have to convert a lot of inferred to indicated. So we have sort of that benefit that we can go and expand. So a lot of the drilling that we will be doing is expansion drilling and exploration drilling. So 20-30% is inside the known footprint. I still wouldn't call it really infill drilling because it's not like you're upgrading inferred to indicated. You're still adding new resources. It's just in the known footprint, right? It's
de-risked exploration, that is.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So you already know that there's some mineralization. You just have to prove it up, have enough drill spacing so that it can be part of the resource. And then about 80,000 meters will be the expansion drilling, which is like I was mentioning, the areas down in the south and in the west, northwest. So sort of those areas where we can laterally expand it a lot. And then, the rest of the drilling will be on other projects like the Martiniere, which we haven't really talked about yet. But maybe I'll just mention quickly the depth, because probably people wonder also about the depth extent. So this is a long section here, looking at it from the side towards the northeast. And basically the drilling is down to a kilometer so far. And, we have one drill hole that's much deeper than that. It goes down to about 1.5 kilometers. And it intersected the same kind of rocks, the same kind of gold mineralization. So we know that in the future, with more, drilling at depth, if we continue drilling in those areas, we should see good, resource expansion at depth. But it's not really going to be much of our focus this year because, like I mentioned, there's so much potential laterally to add to the resource. Sort of in the shallower depth, both to the underground and the open pit resource, that there's no reason right now for us to really go much deeper than a kilometer at this time.
And orogenic gold mineralization is relatively well known for continuing at depth. So that's good.
Yeah,
good to have in the background. Good to have in the back pocket. I'm conscious of time moving on really swiftly. This what a great mineralizing system. I mean, this is a really superb project. Could you perhaps drop the verify now? And let's go back to the gallery view. Miners always want to get mining. let's you want to start mining right away, but one of the worst things out there is having to change your scope or your spec when you're halfway through the project and you go, oh, why didn't you tell me it was going to be a bit bigger or a bit different? Or, oh, I thought we were doing an underground mine. Actually, we're doing an open pit. Or I thought we were doing an open pit. And in the build process, one of the most destructive things in terms of value is changing scope.
Absolutely.
So I just wondered what your approach is to kind of where the company is in terms of its planning. And when you're looking at running the PEA and the project, they kind of wrapping the economics around it. And when you hear a discussion like that on the geology, and Attila is absolutely right, a lot of this is results dependent. I'm not going to hold him not going to hold his toes to the fire and said, oh, but you said you were going to drill all of your meters over here. It doesn't work.
That's
like that.
right. So obviously we've stated already our intent or our approach is to do an economic study or project description when appropriate. We've set out that this year we're drilling 150 to 160,000 meters in order to improve the quantity and the quality of the resource. And after that, perhaps sometime in 2023, we'll conduct an economic study. However, I think it's really important, as you state, that we don't get ahead of ourselves either. So, we can slice and dice this many ways. We can look at this project today, the way we have the resource, and we can actually conduct or evaluate an underground operation. If you look at the resource the way it is today with 60% indicated, we've got about 15 million tons of 3.5 grams in the indicated category at 1.7 million ounces, and then another just shy of 12 million tons of about 3 grams per ton for another 1.1 million ounces. And that would be looking at things from an underground perspective only at a 1.5 gram cutoff. We would have ourselves a very robust underground operation, and we could do a very good economic study on that. However, to your point, we can't get ahead of ourselves too quickly. We have to understand, what is the open pit potential with this project? What is the underground potential? And where's the trade-off, or where's the happy trade-off between those two? And we owe it to ourselves, and I think to our shareholders, to really understand the full potential of the system. And when the time is right, we'll decide, how do we advance this and how do we put together a project description? One of the things that we're doing is we're making sure that regardless of the outcome of the project, we are doing the right studies. We call our no regret decisions. We're carrying out all the studies that are required to support permitting processes and technical studies, or I should say economic evaluations in the future, such as environmental baseline studies. A lot of the studies that you have to collect 2 years worth of data for permitting purposes or more. Those we've been doing since the beginning. We started out in 2018, or in 2019 actually. We started doing a lot of the environmental studies, and we've continued to collect data, expand the footprint of our studies based on our knowledge of the mineralization. We're doing a lot of the geotechnical work, the metallurgical work, the hydrogeology, all of the things that you need to do to support a good project description, an environmental impact study. Those things are all happening. In fact, part of our $70 million budget this year, north of $3 million is on studies and geotechnical and so on and so forth. So, we're not sitting in the sidelines here waiting for the full resource to be complete. We've actually got a small technical studies team assembled, which is conducting all this work in parallel, so that when the time comes, if we decide that we do have enough information, or that we have a proper understanding of the mineralization, we say, hey, let's move on to an economic study. We won't be caught with our pants down, and we'll be able to move things ahead fairly quickly. I like
the phrase "no regrets decisions." That's funnily enough, I was just writing an internal document on exactly that philosophy. Philosophy, but I didn't articulate it so succinctly. I also. It's good to keep evaluating your options on a kind of, essentially, what a senior management team needs to do is run trade-off studies the whole time internally, and to back it up with numbers. And if your team is able to provide those numbers, that's a good thing. I mean, just while you were talking, I mean, you mentioned, you can evaluate an underground operation, but with the work that Attila and the team or the company is doing on the exploration, a lot of that focus is on relatively shallow stuff. And if you're getting shallow material in Martiniere and it's only whatever it is, 35, 40 kilometers away.
Yeah, 30 kilometers.
30 kilometers away. You could quite easily potentially recut it as an open pit development. But that might be a better option, but you won't know that until you've got that resource out.
We're certainly looking at the Martiniere deposit as a satellite deposit to Fenelon. Mars uses the term hub and spoke approach, and I think that's quite valid. We know today that Fenelon is our largest resource out of the two. The day we decide to progress the construction of Fenelon, most of the capital will be sunk there. And obviously anything at Martiniere thereafter is really just complementary. We will not, or the people developing the project, or whoever that is, you wouldn't need to invest all of that upfront capital. Really, all you need is road infrastructure to get to and from Martiniere, and it's only about 30 to 40 kilometers away. That's a very reasonable trucking distance. And in the resource statement that we published back in November, that's how we looked at it. Our cutoff grade was based on the extra costs for trucking material from Martiniere to Fenelon. That would be the assumption.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I've got a much better understanding now of the project and kind of the flagship assets and the environs. And it's also really refreshing and good to meet you both. It's Mars has got a very high profile, and it's great hearing him talk about the company, but it's also very nice to meet people to show the depth in the company. What else? What have I missed? What do you feel as if that we haven't covered that perhaps you are itching to share with me?
Yeah, the one thing I would definitely think is worth sharing is our efforts in the ESG front. The company's been very active on the ESG aspect of things over the last several years, but we never really published anything or touted ourselves as being proactive. And we recently released our inaugural sustainability report a few weeks ago. So that's available for people to read if they wish. But if I was going to go back to that and take a few highlights, the relationship building is very important to us. Doing things right is important to us. And so, we recognize that we are operating in traditional Indigenous territories, and there are 3 communities of interest. And we've worked really hard to establish good relationships with all the communities. We're north of 30% Indigenous employment at our site today. We've got 67 to 70 people from the Indigenous communities that are employed, directly or indirectly through our exploration projects. So, we've forged very strong relationships with the Indigenous groups, and we work to maintain those, provide opportunities, and not only with the Indigenous communities but also the other surrounding communities. Matagami, Lassar, Amos, Val-d'Or, Rouen. We work very hard to make sure that we're sourcing all of our supplies from those areas, so that all of our expenditure or our spending is local. And so, that's just the core of our business and our approach to doing things.
Are you drilling at the moment? So I didn't catch kind of the all round status or the weather status of the project.
We're drilling year round.
Yeah. That's one of the beauties of the project as well, that we're not up north or somewhere where it's seasonal. We can drill year round. And so, we like to keep it sort of consistent at, we sort of gradually ramped up our drill programs. Last year it was mainly, 6 to 8 drills. Now we have 9, adding another one. So, we keep that steady the whole year. So that allows us to keep the core team together. We're not sort of up and down in terms of employment and all that, so we can consistently drill the meters.
And decent turnaround times. You go. Well, where do your assays get? Where do your samples get assayed?
Yeah, so like everywhere else in the industry, it's been a real struggle with assay turnaround times in the last year or two. Obviously, a lot of that is COVID related. Some of it is because of the activity in the industry. But we've actually, what we did this year is we signed an exclusive agreement with one of the assay labs that they have a designated prep facility for us, a preparation facility for us in Val d'Or. So that lab is entirely devoted to our samples that go there. So that got started around early March. So we're already seeing the benefits of that. So instead of right now we're sitting at around 3 months assay turnaround time. But now the assays are starting to come in, and we're hoping we can reduce that back now to a much more, a typical sort of 1 month or something like that. So that should give us a much better, assay turnaround time, which is very important as we said about being result driven. We're drilling certain holes. We have to wait for assays and then decide whether it's worth stepping out. So it's very important for us to have that better turnaround time now.
Gents, well, Attila, thank you very much. I guess when you're drilling 150 to 160,000 meters in a year, it gives you a certain degree of preferred customer status. Yeah, a bit of leverage. Nice talking to you both. Good luck with the programs this year. I look forward to seeing how the 150,000 meters of drilling comes. I mean, that'll certainly pack a punch when it comes to exploration results. So good luck with that all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Great, thanks for having us. Take care.